talked in the first segment about Adam Peters and how impressive he was today, which is to say, like, he sounded like a real NFL GM. I will say the part that impressed me the most probably about Adam Peters is in the beginning of the press conference, just like how human he was. And I've said this before, and I will continue to say this. I think like humanity is an underrated part of doing a management job, and like general managers pretty big on the whole managing thing. He's a human being, like a real salt of the earth person. Like played high school football and wasn't that good at it, relatively speaking to the men that he will employ. But he did eventually walk on to UCLA. Like he played at a JUCO. Like he just has grinded his whole life up through the New England scouting department, and then ultimately to Denver, where he plays a pretty significant role. But like even little thing, Nikki Javala from the Washington Post asked the first question. And he says, "Hey, Nikki, nice to see you. I think I knew you a little bit in Denver." There's like a human touch there. It's like, oh yeah, like I've heard of you. I don't think that, like, maybe, I don't know, maybe secretly that was a wink and a nod because Adam was some amazing source for Nikki back when Nikki worked at the Denver Post. But more realistically, like he probably just read stuff about the team and she was writing it. And so he's familiar with her name and her work. And so it's like, hey, I see you, other human being. Like Bruce Allen never did that kind of stuff. You know, I think Josh Harris shows some human stuff today. And like I pointed this out on Twitter and it's taken on a life of its own, but Adam Peters called Josh Harris Josh. He didn't call him Mr. Harris. Like there's I see you as another person that we're working together with, not you are a subordinate to me that I think is good for the organization and matters for these jobs. Like in your ability to evaluate people, you need to be a person. You can't be this like machismo, like tough football, blah, 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 you know, no feelings, no emotions person. Like he thanked his wife and his kids, and he had a nice laugh because he thanked his two young daughters. He's like, they're being pretty good right now. Thank you. He's still in dad mode up there. Like, that's awesome. That's good stuff. And, of course, if you can't scout for anything, that's not really going to help you that much in the end. Being a nice person isn't everything. But I also think you can't do the job without being a good person. So that was good to see the humanity of both men, frankly, on display today. But I think the bigger thing that I take away is kind of this thing that we talked about on Friday with Evan Novi-Williams when we were talking about the landscape of ownership in professional sports right now. And that is that Josh Harris is a first-generation rich person. And what I mean by that is he is not someone that was born into money. He is not someone that has grown up with money his whole life. And that means, one, he acts like a normal person. I mean, he's a socially awkward dude. I don't get that twisted. But that is like, he's a normal person with social awkwardness who happens to be worth billions of dollars. As opposed to like someone who grew up with a billionaire dad on private planes or billionaire mom on private planes with butlers, and like he might, I don't know, maybe he has that stuff now, but he there's a normalcy about him because he is a first generation rich person, not someone who grew up rich and that's the only life he's known. And it also means he actually had to earn the money, and the strategic thinking that goes into earning that kind of money is pretty intense. Like you either have to be incredibly lucky and kind of rich to start, AKA the last owner, or like not every owner can take out millions of dollars of loans from their dad. And that's what Dan did. And he turned nothing into basically the Commanders and failed at every other business thing he did because he actually wasn't that smart. And I don't say that to pile on and to beat a dead horse, but like I think it's really important to understand that like part of the reason this franchise sucked for 24 years by and large was because the owner, the guy running it, was not very intelligent. And Josh Harris is extremely intelligent, and it informs how he makes decisions and the processes that he goes through and the people that he consults and the people that are in his network to consult with in the first place. All that stuff really matters. And I think what also was on display is how he sees himself. And this goes back to the humanity and the humility of all of it and the idea of servant leadership, which is something that I'm firmly believe in. I think the best leaders don't look at it as like, I'm in charge, everyone follow me. They look at it as, I'm in charge, so what can I do to help you? That's what servant leadership is. And part of that is stewardship. Like, you're in charge of, in this case, a sports organization. Your job is to get it safely till you no longer have it anymore. And Josh Harris certainly is hoping that he can pass it along to his kids. But whether it's a future sale or it's, his final days, hopefully a long time from now, that he passes it on, like, he wants to leave it better than he found it. And that stewardship is something that he sees as a responsibility, not just for him, but for Adam Peters. He was asked about who the next head coach is, and I think his answer was really interesting.
Both of us are, in essence, come from the model that we're stewards for the city and that we're on a mission to deliver success to Washington. And so obviously, hiring a coach that is on the mission with us, that is all in, that himself or herself can attract the best people. All of those things, and then hold them accountable, and obviously ultimately comes with a certain amount of IQ, football intelligence. I think IQ matters. I think it matters increasingly. So I think that all of those things will be important, but ultimately a partner, where the three of us can be aligned and, work for the city, on behalf of the city, to win.
I mean, that answer to me is so telling, and the number of times that he referred to Peters as his partner. And like, I remember talking to a player in the in the postseason locker room, the open locker room, which somehow was just a week ago, Monday. So a week ago from yesterday. And the player talked about how Ron often felt very upstairs, as they would call it. Upstairs is where the front office is. Downstairs is where the coaches and the players are. And I think what Harris is establishing is like, yeah, we're upstairs, but like, we're upstairs doing stuff. We're upstairs with the idea that we're overseeing that this goes the right way for the city. And I think it's going to be on the head coach to be the liaison in many ways between upstairs and downstairs. Ultimately, the head coach needs to live downstairs. The head coach needs to be the downstairs partner of what's going on upstairs. And I think that's what they're looking for. And that can take, as Adam Peters says, many shapes. That can be an offensive-minded head coach. That can be a defensive-minded head coach. But there's going to be tenets of toughness and doing things the right way that come from upstairs that will make their way downstairs. And that's how you build a winning organization in the NFL. In many ways, it's that simple. The execution of it is extremely difficult. And so we'll see whether it's a Ben Johnson, a Bobby Slowick, a Mike McDonald, an Anthony Weaver, an Aaron Glenn. Like, there are great candidates out there. But I do think that is a really interesting framing from Josh Harris, the one that Adam Peters is wholeheartedly on board with, and one that should get Commanders fans excited about the future.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.